ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have a returning good brother into the monastery, coming back with us after a lengthy absence, with more expansions for both Big Eyes Small Mouth and A5e, the launch of Heart Attack for both Big Eyes Small Mouth and Powered by the Apocalypse, as well as the third part in the Ikarian books, and just a big ass mega campaign that is doing quite well at 23.2 thousand at the time we're recording this, with 10 days to go. The one and only Mark MacKinnon. How you doing today, man?
Hey, you're great. Thanks for having me on.
So, we've obviously got a lot to go over tonight, and I'm going to try my best to figure out how I'm going to cover 5 different projects in the span of 1 hour. But
well, we can be quick about it.
Oh yeah. So, I guess I'll start with the newest thing that was attempted as a Kickstarter earlier in the year and is now at its round 2, and that is Heart Attack. Now,
yeah, this is something new for us.
Oh yeah, and to my knowledge, this is the first time that you doing multiple systems in one go is nothing new for you. But to my knowledge, this is the first time you've tackled Powered by the Apocalypse. What prompted doing PBTA along with TriStat?
Yeah, there's several firsts with the Heart Attack. So what we've never done a single book with 2 different core systems in it underneath Discami Publishing. I've done in the past with other games 20, 30 years ago, but in terms of what Discami's done, this is our first for us. And when we had an opportunity to do the Heart Attack RPG and license it from Skybound Entertainment, based on the comic book that was done, we decided, we looked at TriStat, and TriStat certainly fits for what because it's a universal system, it's a generic system, and so it would certainly fit to almost anything. But we thought something special about Heart Attack was it really had a more narrative focus. And so when we looked at the options, we thought, well, what a great way to bring a Heart Attack to a different crowd as well as our existing TriStat fan base. And Powered by the Apocalypse is obviously a very popular system, narratively focused, and a lot of flexibility is built into it. So it's not a rigid system; it's more of a framework than an actual system. And we thought that would be really quite good. I'm playing in some games with the Forged in the Dark and Powered by the Apocalypse, and it just seemed like a good place for us to move for a game like Heart Attack.
Mm-hmm. So, was it an easy or difficult endeavor to shift over some aspects from TriStat over into PBTA, since they are games with very, very different philosophies?
Yeah, well, and what's interesting about this is it actually gave us an opportunity to look at what we were doing with TriStat as well. So their existing TriStat structure has been more numerically based. I mean, it's very comprehensive, very flexible, and you can do a lot with it. It powers our absolute power superhero game at the really high end, and powers our Big Eye Small Mouth anime game. So when we looked at Heart Attack, which we wanted to make it more narrative, we decided to not use our standard TriStat system with all of its numbers and its relatively moderate crunch, but there's certainly some fiddly bits with it, and we modified it, we iterated it into a new version we're calling TriStat Refined. So it's still very much TriStat in its essence and its core, but it has more flexibility with using descriptions rather than numbers, and that fed really well into working with Powered by the Apocalypse, because as I mentioned, it's a framework, the Powered by the Apocalypse, not an actual system. And so you look at the hundreds of different games out there, they have different core stats, they have different actions that the characters can do. And so we thought, well, given that the core of TriStat being body, mind, and soul as our kind of base stats, we could carry those over and actually still have body, mind, soul as stats for Powered by the Apocalypse. Now we added in an extra one to deal with the variations or the superpowers that the characters have in the license. So we did modify it slightly. It's obviously it's not a port; it is a separate system and an adaptation. But anytime, I mean, I love systems. I love the artistry of systems and the balance and the design. And so having a chance to go into something new for the first time with Powered by the Apocalypse and play with that framework to see what I could tease out to make it fit what we were going for with the Heart Attack series and really the essence of it. It was certainly a challenge, but it was a welcome challenge, and I really enjoy playing with the Powered by the Apocalypse system. And I think we've created a great addition to one of the, adding it to the hundreds of other PBTA games out there. I think Heart Attack is a great addition to it.
Mm-hmm. And PBTA and Supers brings an interesting conundrum, since, and I think we talked about this when we discussed Absolute Power a while back. But Supers is a very, very wide net. And even though Heart Attack it has a more specific approach to its Supers, based on one particular comic instead of based on comic books as a medium, superhero comics as a medium / genre. How do you manage to keep that same straightforwardness that's in PBTA without going overwrought when it comes to powers?
Well, certainly, if anyone who's familiar with Masks as the role playing, so that's a PBTA game that is a superhero game based on playing Teen Titan type characters, and what they make it really clear in that game, and I took certainly an inspiration when doing our version, was that you're not assigning powers to the characters. What you're doing is the characters are doing things, and the powers may be the vector in how they do it. And so an example that I actually put in this book is if there's a move that's called, which is kind of like the actions that characters can do in PBTA games. And so Stay Free is a move that we have in the Heart Attack Powered by the Apocalypse game, and staying free is kind of the representation of resisting the tyranny of authority that happens in it. It's a very authoritarian style game where you have in the universe people with superpowers are kind of looked down upon. You can almost bring in some analogies to like X-Men. It's really not X-Men, but like the idea of that discrimination. And so a character move of staying free is what the character does, but they may use their superpower to do it. They may use a fire extinguisher and they spray it at the authorities that are coming on. It's not about what they can do, it's about what they are doing. And the vector that they use is about the narrative of the story, whether they use their superpower, their variation, it's called, or variant, whether they use their variation or they use their other aspects in the game where you're going to tease that out during the role-playing session through description. And I think Max is, set a bar for doing that really well for superheroes. Now, of course, as you had mentioned, we're looking at a very different, very structured and focused and strict to the license. So it's not nearly as open, but we took those same ideas and said, it's not about the powers, it's about the characters, and what the characters do through performing the moves in PPPTA gets rid of the whole problem of what can the powers do, because it's not about the powers.
Yeah. So given that, obviously PBTA is built around playbooks, and I'd like to go over these 6 playbooks and what characters you think would be a close analog outside of characters in Heart Attack, just to draw parallels.
Sure, yeah.
Starting with the free body.
Yeah, so obviously if people aren't as familiar with the comics, they're not going to understand all the nuances that we have with it, of course. But a free body is a organization or the type of person that is part of the resistance network. Whether you go back to something like the old V television show where they're resisting against the aliens coming down, or a traditional like The Boys, which is going on right now, where the boys are resisting what's happening against the superpowers there. So a free body is someone who's part of an organization which isn't about superpowers, and many of them don't even have superpowers. They're just people that are they were born with a variant. They have these genetic mutations, and they are oppressed because of the way society is set up. And so a free body is someone that is set up to fight against that. And that's, I mean, there's any kind of freedom fighter, a resistance fighter, whether it's real life or fiction, it's very easy to understand what a free body would be.
All right. What about a guardian?
Yeah, guardians are you're going to be closer to your tanks in a traditional RPG setting. They are going to be the bodyguards of people that put other people first, that are designed to protect other people. There's one character in particular called Rom. He's like a bodyguard for one of the main characters in the Heart Attack comic, and so a lot of this is going to be your people that are maybe not taking all the spotlight, but they're there in a pinch whenever you need to have someone protect you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so influencer.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, everyone that term evokes so much now in the internet age, and everyone understands what that means with social media. With a Heart Attack, playing with the minds and hearts of people in a digital world is very important for a lot of these characters, and so they will do live streaming. They will, do social media posts, and they'll almost like independent bloggers or journalists that are designed to influence what's happening in the public perception of the resistance fighters and what it means to have these variants. And so your standard influencers, you can think of like a reporter junior, but also stuff like preachers and politicians as well could fall underneath the influencer realm.
Yeah. What immediately comes to mind is the media role in Cyberpunk.
So yeah, that exact type of thing. No doubt, influencer fits well there.
Yeah, and depending on interpretation, the rocker boy in Cyberpunk as well. But so the next one, Tech Witch, I'd be curious what that is going to entail.
Yeah, so this particular term comes up from one of the characters described as the local tech witch, who is really almost like a hacker, someone that is good at coding and computer use. It's not like they're not diving in and doing net running. It's not that type of world that Heart Attack set up, but it's someone who knows how to go online and fiddle with technology, whether it's data or security or hardware, and so this is going to be your fixer type.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can get that. And the last one being Visionary.
Yeah, so the Visionary these are the people, and there's one person in particular, the Heart Attack comic, who's kind of the leader of the resistance movement, who's very much the CEO type, the prophet, the strategist, who is the head organizer. So Visionaries obviously share some things with, for example, the influencers, because they are about social aspects, but they go beyond just influencing, and they form creation as well. So they're the ones, these are your typical head of organizations. Think of any superpower team that you'd have from a comic book world. Then yeah, you're going to have your leaders, the people that see what's happening, whether it's a hero like a leader of the Fantastic Four, for example, like a Reed Richards, or it's going to be your Dr. Doom or your Lex Luthor, like the people who are your CEOs. Again, I'm using analogies of what's popular right now in pop media. We don't have these levels of superpowered characters in Heart Attack. That's not what the license is about, but it gets to give you an idea of what the types of characters they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can get that. Now, with that in mind, given that this is handling both Tri-Stat Refined and PBTA, within the Heart Attack book, are you planning on putting in a section to help people convert from one or the other if need be?
No, I mean, it's not a convertible system. What you do with Tri-Stat, whether, again, going back to the Absolute Power, our Big Eye Small Mouth game. So it's a very prescriptive, even if it uses terms rather than numbers in the new Tri-Stat Refined version, but it precisely identifies what powers can do. Where the PBT that I mentioned is not about the powers; it's about the role playing. And so you could look and you can come up with some sort of translation, but it's not really a converting between the two systems. You would have to look and get them to give an idea. And obviously, we stat out some of the main characters in both systems, and you can see one of them, Tristat, is a much more detailed and fulsome, comprehensive accounting of everything the character does, and the PBTA is more about what the character be doing during the game. So they're really not compatible, but they do stand beside each other very well, I think, from a different style of play.
Yeah, I can see that. So with that in mind, let's shift into BESM Imago, which you're referring to as reality punk. Now, there's been plenty of different types of blank punks over the years. How do you define reality punk, and what would be some examples of reality punk in other media?
Yeah, reality punk is one of these odd things. It's difficult to kind of define what we are trying to describe it as. I mean, it's obviously a term, and it's a marketing term. We wanted to align people that it has, like when people are familiar with cyberpunk, which is obviously kind of the big one, there are elements of this punk aspect, the fighting against the corporations and this resisting, and again, Heart Attack covers a lot of these similar aspects as well. So there is this fight the power authority type stuff. But the reality punk is about how the large corporations who are kind of running the world are the ones effectively defining reality for people. The punk aesthetic is about the resistance and the grudge movement to oppose the reality core, and the reality is just one more thing to be created and sold by the corporations. And that's why we thought that this term, which we actually coined back whenever BESM 3rd edition was first published, going back to 2006. We kept that through when we were doing the 4th edition of BESM, but we think it kind of gives enough of a feel with just that single term to kind of tell people a little bit that it's like cyberpunk, but it's about the reality of the world.
Mm-hmm. All right, I can get that. And when it comes to it, obviously I'm guessing there's going to be some new advantages and disadvantages that are added to BESM with this, I'm guessing Imago was built more for BESM 4th edition than Tristat Refined.
Oh, absolutely. This is 100% a BESM 4th edition expansion. This is one of the prime worlds that we're expanding upon. And so of the 7 primes world, we've already done Icarus, which is our fantasy world. That was the first one we did. And then Imago is the next one we're doing, which is more it's like a near future, think, Earth a little bit in the future with some new technologies that come in, where the globalization of all the networks, the nations have collapsed and corporations have stepped in to run everything. That's kind of where we are with Imago, and it is absolutely a BESM expansion because BESM itself is so comprehensive in what it offers. We don't have new rules as such put in here, like here's a bunch of new attributes or here's a bunch of new defects, but what we do is show the application of what these are through the characters, through the setting, through the items that we're presenting, and the opposition, whether it's a creature or a stereotypical anime villain. And so we're presenting that as a setting book, as options for players, but this is not what I would call a rule expansion, because as BESM being the multi-genre universal system that it's been around since 1997, most of the system is in the core rules itself, and then these are add-ons for that.
All right, I can get that. Now, I also would be remiss if I didn't bring up the dungeon crawl expansion you're doing for Anime 5e. Speaking of more focused affairs, more focused in terms of mechanics.
Yeah, I mean, interesting with the dungeon crawl, this actually came from originally a BESM 2nd edition expansion that we just called it BESM Dungeon back in 2001, 2002. And it was just a little book for BESM. It was like, here's how you run dungeon. I mean, BESM was never about dungeon crawling. That's kind of wasn't its thing, but we thought at the time, hey, let's make a dungeon, and this could be kind of fun. And it's very much an anime dungeon. This is not a D&D dungeon. It's a lot of very oddities to it, with larger than life characters and very melodramatic situations. And that did very well for us for BESM, and we're happy of that as a session edition expansion. But I've always been so attracted to what that was and how it kind of went against the normal BESM grain. But a dungeon is absolutely fits in with Anime 5e because it's based on the 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons, and it fits very well into that. And so I took the framework of everything that was in the original BESM dungeon and then rewrote it for Anime 5e, which involved having to get new creatures, new monsters, obviously new stats, and coming up with the characters, coming up with the ideas of it. But the bones were so strong, we just had to add to it. But we didn't just want to make it just a straight up adventure that was only for DMs, which is why we put so many player options in Dungeon Crawl. So it really becomes something that the players can use as well. Yes, as an adventure, it's going to be primarily DM facing, but having more options for the players to say, well, here's a bunch of new species you can play. And here's a bunch of, yes, you have in Anime 5e, you have the different classes, whether it's a ninja or an isekai student or a magical girl. Well, here's how we have a package, almost like a subclass, which subclasses don't exist in Anime 5e, but they're very popular in standard 5th edition. So we've come up with what are effectively subclasses, and so it's not just a samurai, for example. This is a particular type of samurai that is appropriate for this adventure, and we don't have just the thief ninja type. We now have an assassin, which is a subclass of a ninja, and having these added in there greatly increased, I think, the playability from a character point of view. It's not just a dungeon. It offers more player options as well for the players can enjoy, as in addition to the GM.
Yeah. Now, with that in mind, it's interesting you mentioned subclasses, since Anime 5e is still largely as point based as BESM is in a lot of ways, and and because of that, how do you do the whole idea of subclasses while still maintaining that point basis and still maintaining that idea of point budgets that are within the core materials?
Yeah, the reason why subclasses as a concept didn't really work in Anime 5e and wasn't necessary, because you have these additional points. Almost every character class that we give, we say, well, here's the progression over levels 1 to 20, and here's all the things that they get at the different levels, all the different features that you'd be common for a D&D game in a D&D class. But these are from attributes that we have in Anime 5e, but almost every one also has free points that they can spend. So you might get a free point at level 2, maybe another one at level 4, maybe a couple of them, depending on the different classes. Some classes have more flexibility with how many free points they get to spend. So rather than prescribing everything that they do, there was always free points that different classes have. And what we did with Anime 5e, with the Dungeon Crawl, is we took these free points and we assigned them for people. And doing that assignment almost creates a subclass to say, well, over, say, the first 3 levels, you would usually get A, B, and C as your advantage, and then you have 3 extra free points. Well, if we assign these 3 points in a very specific way, that becomes a definition of a subclass. Anyone can spend those 3 points however your DM would allow you, and the flexibility that's in Anime 5e is really its core strength. It's not a rigid prescribed system the way the D&D style classes are, but we've done that particularly for this because you're going into a dungeon crawl setting, and so we wanted to spend all of your points. So first of all, you don't have to make decisions. Secondly, it's really quick and just you can pick up and go, but it gives you that feel that you're going for. And it's not even just the full free points. Some of them are in the attributes for a class progression, gives you options within a selection. So we may say that at level 2, this character gains 1 combat technique. A combat technique is like, think of those as feats from D&D. And so there's all these different things you can do, and you could choose a feat, or in this case, choose 1 combat technique. But with the subclasses, with these pre-built templates, we've assigned that already and say, you don't just get 1 combat technique. This is the specific combat technique the assassin gets. They get the blackout combat technique, so they have a better chance of knocking people out. And it removes some flexibility. Yes, I mean, that's the core strength of Anime 5e, its flexibility. But what it gives up in the flexibility, it gains in speed and utility for jumping into the dungeon right away, but also for giving that feel of what this subclass is, which is really when you look at the D&D subclasses, whether they're fighter subclasses or paladin subclasses, they're evocative features that kind of give you some direction for your character for roleplay. And that's what we have here with these subclass analogies in Dungeon Crawl.
Yeah. Now, speaking of that, there is the elephant in the room regarding grid combat, which is something I've had some back and forths with over the last 4 years with my own work, and doing so for this sort of multi-level dungeon. Is it going to be a case where each floor of that dungeon is a set layout, or are you arranging it so that a GM can make it a bit more flexible, in keeping with that flexibility of Anime 5e?
Yeah, we have the full maps are there. It's a little grid-based section, and for the different levels, they have like a full traditional D&D style play area. Now that said, whether someone uses it in that way is completely up to them. I ran through this particular dungeon with the group that I run, and we have an Anime 5e game going on, and I threw in this as a multi-session way for people to run through it, and we played at the university, and so we're in a classroom, and I would just draw on the chalkboard to give the rough outlines of what's happening. But I like playing with more narrative. I don't use hexes and grids the way I did back in high school and university, where we'd bring out the maps and then you had old miniatures. That's the way I used to play D&D, but now I don't play that way. I play it much more descriptive, but sometimes it's nice to have a visual element. And so drawing it on a chalkboard and say, well, here's the layout of the room, and this is 30 feet wide and 60 feet long. And if people wanted to play it grid-based on either a VTT or a tabletop that they have sitting in the center of the room with their little miniatures, they're welcome to, but it's not required to do that. And Anime 5e is the exact same thing. The core game, you can play it grid-like if you want, but that's not the philosophy that it's a requirement to play grid, because the theater of the mind style is more the philosophy that I've always had in my publishing career. I like that play style better. But people can do what they want, and we do provide the maps that have the full layouts if people want them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can get that. And it was an interesting move that you're building it with third level in mind as a minimum level. What prompted starting at third instead of first, and how high can it potentially go? Are we going all the way to 20th? Are we going into the teens, into the 10? What would you say the range is for this dungeon crawl?
Yeah, I mean, this is always the eternal question when you're running D&Ds. Where do you start and where do you go? We looked at 3 to 6, and the level 3 to 6 is kind of a nice range where you're not too powerful, but you're not neophytes either. The problem with first level is, I mean, when you have some of these characters that have 6 hit points, like just a single swords cut from a generic low-level monster can kill or put someone at 0 hit points, and then they'd have to start rolling death saving throws if you wanted to play it that way. Starting at third level gives you a few extra options. You're a little bit seasoned, you have enough you can take a hit or two, you have several different features that you can play with. It's not just one level of features for your character class. You actually have 3 of them to go with. So it was really, to start at third level, gives people that flexibility of what the characters can do, a little bit more options. And when you're going through, there's a multi-level dungeon, and we're recommending you'll probably advance. By the time you get to the end, you'll be about level 6. So it's, again, everyone runs D&D and 5th edition different. Some people advance really, really quickly, and other people are super stingy on their advancement and how they're awarded out. It's totally up to what people want. We've had monsters that are within the range of the 3 to 6 is the opponents, but it's very simple. If you enter a room and there's 5 monsters there, and if that's too powerful, well, maybe it should be 4 monsters you're fighting. Or if it's not powerful enough, give everyone an extra 20 hit points, for example. It's a very flexible system on how to tailor it for your group. But when you're going down in the levels of the dungeon, just in traditional, like many different D&D style games, your first levels are going to be weaker than your second levels and your third levels as you go deeper into your dungeon. And we set up the same thing. But we thought that third level was just a really good starting point. It's what we did the equivalent of that back when we first did BESM Dungeon, where the number of points were enough to be, you're not a newbie, but you're not super experienced either. It gives you a little bit of experience and flavor, and we decided to carry through that with Dungeon Crawl because it really worked well at third level.
Yeah, I could most certainly get that. I know I said it a lot. It's habit. But with that in mind, the final thing I'd like to get into, and I'm not asking for any spoilers or anything like that, but just a kind of in hindsight thing of, with this campaign, you are putting out the third book in the Ikarian Bane trilogy of isekai lit RPG novels. And in hindsight, what were some of the things that came easy and were a bit more difficult in writing a lit RPG versus writing a straight fantasy?
Yeah, well, I mean, the lit RPGs are something that they're almost seemingly taking over the fantasy field right now in terms of novels. If you were to go on, for example, Audible or Amazon, and you were to look at all the top bestsellers, a lot of them are lit RPGs now. Dungeon Crawl Carl is like on everyone's mind in their fantasy. If you're a fantasy reader and you do not understand what Dungeon Crawl Carl is, maybe you're not as up to date on what's actually happening in the field. So lit RPGs are just very popular in general, particularly with the audiobooks, even more so than the print edition, because a lot of these they really focus on the audio being the real strength of the lit RPGs. So in terms of like how a book is written, I think that a writer can write either. The advantage we had with lit RPGs, I'm not the author of it, but Ethan Freckleton is. The advantage we have with lit RPGs is we're an RPG publisher, and so we had that built-in system. And most lit RPGs, when they're written, they don't use a particular system. That's just something that they come up with. It's just a fiction. Where our lit RPGs, because it's set in the BESM multiverse, uses the BESM system as the RPG aspect of the lit RPG. That gave us an advantage, certainly, from creating it, because we didn't have to create a system from scratch. I listened to some audiobooks, and they're talking about, they have their stats and their abilities, whether it's perception or strength. They're in the 20,000 perception. I mean, it just blows my mind how some lit RPGs have approached their system, where they're creating the system as well as creating the fiction. We had the system created, so Ethan, whenever he was doing the writing, had to create the fiction. That would probably be the biggest strength we had for it. The biggest problem or disadvantage really comes down from a marketing point of view. Is we're not a novel company. We're an RPG publisher, but we're publishing something that's not an RPG. It's a book. And so it's this trying to find this positioning. It was really like a labor of love. It's something that we liked doing. I'm a lit RPG fan. We have BESM. Wouldn't it be great if we had that bridging together of novels, fiction, and RPGs? And lit RPGs allows us to do that. So it was something that I'm really happy we did. We're not really in a position to do it as well as some of the larger, specifically lit RPG dedicated publishing companies, because we're not a fiction company. We're an RPG gaming company, and that's what we're known for. But this was a nice way to also show what we're doing in BESM, because it's set in the BESM multiverse, and we adhered to the canon that we have. And so if people are BESM players and they're playing an Imago and Icarus, then they get to see some elements that we don't have time to do in an RPG book, because no one wants to read just tons of exposition in an RPG book. They want it for the gaming aspect. Well, here's a novel that gives them that context, and it's helpful for people's gaming, I think, if they see what the characters can do in that world and some of the elements of that world that we didn't have a chance to explore fully in the RPG itself.
Oh yeah, I can certainly see that. So With that in mind, what would you be shooting for as far as a release window for some of these projects?
Yeah, well, I mean, in the end, what we're saying is that we're going to release the PDFs in the fall, around October, and then looking at in the springtime for the print product. Because we're dealing with a licensed product with Heart Attack, we do need to get it approved, and so we do have to go through an approval process. And while it's well underway, we have done many licensing in the past. A few with Discami, with Sailor Moon, for example, but I've worked on many more with other licenses in the previous company, and I know that you have to build in that time for that. Another thing that has to be a consideration, and that's always on someone's head, is what's going on with the tariffs. Right? We think we know right now, which of course could change tomorrow, and so we have to build in a time for us to make sure we understand the shipping, and time for us to get the printing done in the best way to get the printing job done. And then, of course, because there's so many products that we're doing at one time, we wanted to kind of gang them together. It makes more sense economically, both from our production point of view, but also from whether it's international shipping, on ocean freight, having all of them together, it makes sense. And of course, shipping out to the backers as well, because some backers are ordering multiple books from different lines. And so doing all this takes a little bit longer than we usually have whenever we run most Kickstarters. As soon as the Kickstarter is over, within a couple of weeks, we usually send out all the PDFs for people and get into production right away. But because of the nature of what we're doing here and with the licensed product, we built a little bit more time in, and we're being very transparent with our backers about it to know what's happening. It's still going to be faster than most RPGs out there. A lot of them are putting out products, and they'll come out a year or two later. We don't do that type of production timeline usually, but we do need to have a little bit more time than we had last time. For example, the last RPG we just did, Soldier Loon, there was a time where it was just sitting at the printers after it finished because of the tariff issue, and we couldn't book space because we couldn't risk it showing up and being hit with tens of thousands of dollars in tariffs because of this unknown situation. So we kind of had to play the market a little bit and watch the news before we make our decisions. And we've tried to build in as much of that with this here, so we don't leave our backers hanging and disappointed that we didn't meet our deadlines. We tried to build in a little bit more space for that, and we hope that our track record speaks for itself.
Yeah, and I'll certainly look forward to that. I realize that setting these kind of things up and setting it out is something of a nightmare, but it's always been that the tariffs are just one form of it, which will come and go. But with that said,
yeah, something we company obviously being affected by this, and so it was just the right time for us to do what we want to do. I mean, the whole package of what we're doing has all been delayed. After the election in November last year, that did throw our production schedule into a disarray because of the uncertainty about things. So all of this is coming a little bit later than we want, and we're behind the eight ball on a few things. But I mean, that's the nature of publishing. We're small and agile, but we also have to go with where the market is leading us, and that is dealing with the economies of international trade.
Mm-hmm. So with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way back to my monastery and enjoy the madness that happens around here.
Well, thanks. It's always great to talk to your listeners and talk a little bit about what we're doing. So thanks for having us on again.
Mm-hmm. And anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged. And, of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there will be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
心